The first thing the deputy noticed was the maintenance shed door sitting a few inches open, like it had been nudged and left that way on purpose. The padlock still hung from the hasp, but it wasn't broken or bent. It was cut clean, the way metal looks when someone uses the right tool and takes their time. It was July 2016, just outside Logan, Ohio, in the Hocking Hills, and the park was packed with weekend families who thought the worst thing they'd deal with was a full parking lot and a long line at the ice cream stand. A service truck sat crooked near the Trailhead sign. The driver door was open. Inside, the cabin smelled like sweat and sun-baked plastic. Tools were laid out on the gravel in neat rows, not dumped like a rushed job, but arranged like a person expected to come back and keep working. A splice kit, a small ladder, a hard hat, a lunch cooler set in the shade of the truck bed. Nothing about it looked like a man had decided to leave for the day. He didn't come back. Earlier that afternoon, a ranger had warned him about missing hikers and the kind of rumors that always show up when people don't have answers. Something walking upright after dark, something watching the trailheads, a werewolf, said with that half-joking tone people use when they want to admit they're nervous without sounding like they're scared. The technician laughed it off, because that is what you do when you're trying to look normal, and he agreed to keep his radio on while he traced a service line deeper into the woods. At dusk, the ranger returned with a volunteer searcher. They followed fresh boot prints to a low rock recess that smelled like damp earth, rust, and cold metal. That was where the calls started. A short burst on a handheld radio, a man whispering for help, then silence. Minutes later, somebody else answered, breathing hard, saying only that the werewolf was close. When deputies finally reached the gorge, they found a smear of dark on stone, one flashlight still shining into nothing, and no sign of the technician for hours. Let me tell you exactly how it went, because the rumors that came after did what rumors always do. They skipped the boring parts and decorated the rest. The truth was uglier in a quieter way, because it was something a person could actually do. At the time, I was 32 and taking any overtime I could get, because rent doesn't care whether you feel like working on a Saturday. I did line work for a small internet outfit that served cabins, rentals, and back roads. Most days, it was polls, pedestals, and angry calls about buffering during a ball game. That morning started with my dispatcher reading me a complaint from a cabin owner who swore the line was getting chewed up every night. She said it like she meant animals, like raccoons had developed a taste for fiber optics. The job ticket had 2 clusters of addresses tucked into the hills, both fed by the same run that followed a service path near a popular trail system. I remember thinking it would be a quick splice, maybe 2, and then lunch somewhere with air conditioning. I tossed extra connectors in my kit, grabbed my tester, and headed out, driving south past fields and small towns until the land folded into wooded ridges and the road started curving like it had opinions. By late morning, the heat had that sticky Midwest weight to it, the kind that makes your shirt cling even if you're standing still. I pulled into a trailhead lot that was already half full. Families unloaded strollers. A couple took selfies by a map kiosk. Kids ran in circles while their parents tried to apply sunscreen like they were patching a roof. Nobody looked worried. That mattered later because the place didn't feel like a crime scene. It felt like a park on a nice day. My company truck was the only one with a ladder rack and a logo, so I got a few looks right away. People always stare at a work truck like it's either going to save them or inconvenience them. I parked near the edge and walked over to the pedestal that fed the cabins. The cover was open, but not ripped. The bolts weren't stripped or snapped. They had been backed out in a clean pattern. Inside, the fiber line was cut straight through, a tidy slice that told me someone had used a blade. Animals don't cut like that. Weather doesn't cut like that. Accidents don't cut like that unless the accident is a person with intent. I was crouched there, staring at the cut ends, when a woman in a green uniform walked up with the calm posture of someone who spends all day telling strangers where the bathrooms are. Her radio was clipped high on her shoulder. She didn't smile, but she didn't look hostile either. She looked tired in the way you get when you've had to repeat the same warning too many times. "You the cable guy?" she asked. "Internet," I said. "Close enough?" Her eyes flicked over my truck, then back to the woods. "Don't go past the closed gate alone." I glanced toward the service gate near the edge of the lot, the kind that blocks vehicles, but not feet. "Is that your rule or a real rule?" "A real rule," she said. "I'm Maya, park ranger." I introduced myself, gave her my first name, and pointed at the cut. "This isn't animals. Someone opened it and sliced it. Clean." She didn't look surprised, and that was my first real clue that something was wrong in a way I didn't want to understand. "You heard about the hikers?" she asked. I had not really. Missing people are background noise until they aren't. "No. There are 3 we're tracking," she said. 2 from last month, 1 from Tuesday, all within a few miles of here." "That's a lot of woods," I said, because I wanted it to be true. "It narrows down at night," she said. "People start making up reasons for why they don't have answers. They call it a werewolf. They say it like that word makes it safer." I almost laughed, because my brain wanted to treat it as a joke, but her face didn't invite it. She looked past me toward the tree line, like she expected something to step out and wave. "I'm not here for stories," I said. "I'm here to fix a cut." "Then keep your radio on," she said. "If you see anything that doesn't make sense, you come back. Don't go wandering because you're curious." I promised, because it was easier than arguing, and because something in her tone told me she'd already had the kind of day where you don't ignore advice. The line ran down a service path that paralleled one of the trails, then dipped into a thicker stand of trees where the park felt less like a postcard and more like a place that could swallow sound. I carried my kit, a small ladder, and my tester. The air under the canopy was cooler, but it wasn't comforting. It was quiet in a focused way, like the woods were listening. A family passed me heading back toward the lot. The kids had popsicles and bright red faces. The dad nodded at my ladder like I was part of the scenery. A couple in sandals asked if the path led to Old Man's Cave, and I pointed them the right way. Normal conversations, normal day. That normality is what keeps you from trusting your own instincts later, because your body is saying something's off and your eyes are saying everything is fine. About a quarter-mile in, I found the second cut. Same story. A junction case opened cleanly. A straight slice through the line. Whoever did it wasn't angry. He wasn't tearing things apart. He was being careful. That kind of careful is what makes your skin tighten, because it means the person isn't improvising. He has time. I set up to splice. My hands did the work on autopilot, stripping, cleaning, prepping, aligning. The smell of alcohol wipes, the little click of the cleaver, the quiet beep of my tester. While I worked, I kept thinking about how you'd even get here without being noticed. The gate kept vehicles out. You'd have to walk in. You'd have to know where the line ran. You'd have to want a technician to follow it. My radio crackled once. Not a voice, just a brief open carrier, like someone leaned on the button and let go. "Maya?" I said. No answer. It happened again a few minutes later, the same quick chirp. I told myself it was interference, the hills messing with signal, the way radios sometimes act in ravines. Still, I found myself turning my head, listening harder than the job required. By early afternoon, I finished the splice and started back, planning to tell Maya what I'd seen and get out before evening. I liked hiking, but I didn't like being in somebody else's woods with a problem I didn't understand. The sun was starting to angle lower, and the parking lot noise carried differently, like sound was bouncing off rock faces and funneling in odd directions. When I stepped back into the lot, I noticed the maintenance shed right away, mostly because I hadn't cared about it before. It sat off to the side, a plain metal box with a hasp lock. I assumed it held cones, shovels, maybe a weed trimmer. Now the padlock looked bright at the cut, fresh metal exposed. Somebody had taken bolt cutters to it and done it neatly, not like a vandal, but like a worker who knew what he was doing. I walked up slow, more annoyed than scared, because my brain still wanted to make it about property damage and paperwork. The shed door was cracked open, and I could smell oil and damp inside. On the dusty concrete near the threshold were my own boot prints from earlier when I'd parked and walked past. Next to them were different prints, wider and deeper, an old work boot tread with a heavy heel. Not a hiking shoe, not a ranger boot, the kind of boot a guy wears when he wants his feet to last. I backed away and scanned the lot. My truck sat where I'd left it, driver door still open the way I'd been working out of it. Maya's patrol vehicle was gone. A few cars were still parked near the trail sign. People laughed somewhere, far enough away that I couldn't place them. Leaves moved in a warm breeze. That was it. My radio hissed again. This time a voice came through, low and close to the mic, like someone was holding it near his mouth to keep the sound tight. "Help!" One word, and it hit me harder than any long warning. People don't call for help on a random channel unless they're in real trouble or they're playing games, and nothing about that voice sounded like a prank. "Who is this?" I said. "Say your name." Silence. I tried again. "Maya, if that's you, answer me." A quick burst of static, then nothing. I did what I should have done first. I called 911. The dispatcher asked my location. I gave the Trailhead name and the nearest road, then told her there was sabotage to utility equipment, a cut lock on the maintenance shed, and an unknown person transmitting help on a handheld radio channel. I added that a ranger had mentioned missing hikers. There was a pause on the line when I said that, a tiny hesitation that told me she'd heard the same thing from someone else. "Units are on the way," she said. "Stay in your vehicle. Do not go into the woods." I said I understood. Then I did what people do when adrenaline convinces them they can manage something they shouldn't. I walked to the trail sign and looked down the main path, telling myself I just wanted to spot Maya so I could warn her. The path sloped toward the gorge, and the trees framed it like a tunnel. Halfway down, I saw her coming up fast, one hand near her belt. Behind her was a man I didn't recognize, wearing a ball cap and carrying a day pack. He moved like he'd been walking hard for hours. Maya lifted a hand when she saw me. "Evan, stop right there." Hearing my name in that open space made my throat tighten. I hadn't told her my name earlier in a way that felt memorable. I'd said it casually. The fact that she used it now, sharp and immediate, made me feel like I'd stepped into a script. "You called 911?" she asked. "Just now," I said. "Someone cut the shed lock, and my radio. Someone keeps—" "I know," she said. "This is Curtis. He's a volunteer with the local search group." Curtis didn't look at me. His eyes were fixed toward my truck like he expected it to roll away by itself. Maya lowered her voice. "A couple from cabin 12 is unaccounted for. Their car is still parked. Their keys are on the picnic table." "That's not my job," I said, and hated how it sounded the second it left my mouth. "I mean, I can't search. I fix lines." "You can walk," Curtis said, and his tone wasn't friendly. It was the kind of sharp you get when you've been searching too long and you've stopped caring about politeness. Maya held up a palm toward him, then looked at me. "You're right. It's not your job. But you found the cut, and whoever did it to pull someone in. We need to see where he's steering things." My radio chirped again, as if it was listening. This time the sound on it was different. Not the word yet, just breathing, fast and close, the microphone picking up the wet pull of air. Maya grabbed her own radio and answered. "Ranger unit, identify." The breathing stopped, as if the person on the other end had heard her and smiled. Then, very soft, the same voice as before. "Help." Curtis swallowed hard. "That's him." "Who is him?" I asked. Curtis looked at me like I was behind the news. "The werewolf." Maya didn't correct him. She just started walking back down the service path, and we followed because standing still felt worse than moving. We didn't go into the shed. Maya wanted daylight, and she wanted to stay on ground she understood. She kept us close and made a point of looking back toward the lot every few seconds, checking for movement. The deeper we went, the more the world narrowed. You stop hearing car doors. You stop hearing laughter. Your own steps become loud. The air smelled like wet stone and leaf mold. Cicadas buzzed in waves. Somewhere, water ran over rock, steady and indifferent. Maya spoke without turning. "No separating. If you see something, you say it immediately. No hero stuff." Curtis gave a quick nod. I didn't trust my voice, so I just gripped my kit strap tighter and followed. We reached the second cut site and kept moving, tracking the buried line path the way I'd learned, looking for where it dipped, where it likely ran under roots, where a junction box would be hidden. Curtis moved like a man used to reading the ground, scanning for broken twigs, scuffed dirt, anything that didn't match the natural mess of the woods. 100 yards past the cut, Curtis stopped and crouched. "Boot prints," he said. I stepped closer. In a patch of damp soil near a rock outcrop were deep tread marks, heavy work boots, the same kind I'd seen by the shed. They angled off the service path toward a cluster of rocks that formed a low recess, a shadowed opening that looked harmless in daylight and wrong as soon as the sun started dropping. Maya kept her flashlight low, aimed at the ground. "Fresh," she said. "Within an hour." Curtis pointed again. "Drag marks." My stomach tightened. I didn't ask what was dragged. I didn't want to give the thought a shape. We moved slow because every instinct in me said the opening ahead was the center of whatever this was. The recess wasn't a cave you could stand in. It was a low rock mouth, the kind of place kids might crawl into as a dare. In that light, it looked like a place designed to swallow a person and keep them quiet. Curtis raised a hand and leaned toward the opening. My radio burst to life. "Help!" the voice said, closer now, like the speaker was only a few yards away. Curtis jerked back so hard he nearly fell. "He's right there." Maya spoke into her radio, her voice steady in a way mine would not have been. "Identify yourself, now." No answer. Something moved inside the recess. Not a lunge, not a dramatic surge, just a steady shift of weight, as if someone inside had adjusted their stance and wanted us to notice. Curtis took one step forward, and I saw Maya's shoulders tighten. That was when everything went wrong in the simplest possible way. A figure came out low and hard. Curtis made a sound like all the air had been knocked out of him. He stumbled backward into me, and I grabbed his packstrap by reflex, trying to keep him upright. He felt heavier than he should have, like his legs had stopped working. Maya moved toward him, and her flashlight slipped from her hand, hitting the ground and rolling, the beam cutting across stone in a bright, useless stripe. Curtis's mouth opened, but no words came. His eyes were wide, focused on something I couldn't see clearly because the opening was shadow and the figure stayed just inside the edge of it. Maya drew her sidearm. She didn't fire because Curtis was between her and the recess, and she was too close for a clean shot without risking him. The figure reached out, grabbed the back of Curtis's pack, and yanked him sideways into the opening with practiced force, the way a person moves something heavy when he knows exactly where the weight will go. I lunged without thinking and caught Curtis's wrist for a second. His skin was slick with sweat. Then something clamped onto my forearm, not teeth, not an animal, but a hard metal pinch that bit through my sleeve and lit my nerves up white hot. My grip broke. Curtis vanished into the dark like he'd been pulled through a slot. Maya fired one shot into the recess, not to hit, but to stop movement and buy space. The sound slammed the rock and came back at us, loud enough to make my ears ring. For a second, everything froze, including my breath. Then the radio came alive again, breathing fast and excited, like someone running with a microphone pressed against his cheek. Maya grabbed my shirt and hauled me backward. "Move," she said, and there was no debate in her voice. We ran. At first, it was controlled, just getting back to the service path, because panic makes you trip, and she knew it. Then the footfalls started behind us. Not an animal sound, not a movie growl, just steady steps on dirt and rock, the sound of a person who could keep pace without hurrying. Maya didn't talk. She ran like she had a plan, angling uphill, keeping us away from side trails, avoiding the places where the path narrowed between rocks. My arm throbbed. My hand tingled like it was asleep. Each time I pumped it while running, pain pulsed up toward my elbow. We hit the main service path and turned toward the lot. Ahead, an orange tape line marked a washout where water had undermined the trail. In daylight, it would have been a simple obstacle. In that dusk, it looked like a trap, because it forced you to slow down and pick your steps. Maya skidded to a stop at the edge. "We can't cross fast," she said. Behind us, the footfalls stopped. The silence was worse than the steps because it meant the person behind us was choosing the moment. Maya lifted her light and swept it side to side. The beam caught bark, leaves, rock, nothing. Then the light landed on something hanging from a branch at eye level, swaying gently. A wolf head mask. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't anything alive. It was latex and fur, big teeth fixed in a grin. The kind you could buy if you knew what store to visit and didn't mind scaring people. Under it, on the ground, was a second set of fresh prints, heavy work boots, deep heel, the same tread as the shed. The person wasn't behind us on the path. He'd circled around through the brush and gotten ahead. Maya's voice went tight. "He's to our side." The brush moved and a man stepped out, calm as if we'd all been scheduled to meet. He wore dark work pants and a jacket with the hood up. The wolf mask wasn't on his face. It hung from his hand like a prop he'd just finished using. His face was human, stubbled, pale, focused. He looked like a guy you could pass in a hardware store and not remember 5 minutes later. In his other hand was a short tool, a metal hook welded onto a handle. That was what had bitten my arm, a homemade grab tool designed to clamp and pull. He looked from Maya's gun to me and back to Maya, measuring distances like he was figuring out which problem to solve first. "Drop it," Maya said. The man's mouth twitched like the words amused him. Then he raised his handheld radio and pressed the button, holding it close. "Help," he said softly into it, careful with the tone, letting the word hang in the air twice, once in his real voice and once in the tiny speaker. In that moment, I understood the whole setup. The clean cuts, the cut lock, the careful footprints, the neat tool layout by my truck. This wasn't chaos. This was a man who liked building traps that made sense because making them make sense was the point. Maya fired. The man moved fast, but not in some impossible way. In a trained way. He dropped and rolled behind a tree, and the shot cracked into bark. Before Maya could adjust, he came back out lower, closing the gap with the hook tool swinging toward her gun hand. It struck her wrist with a dull impact. The gun flew into the brush and disappeared like it had been swallowed. My mind told me to reach for my pocket knife, to do something useful, but my hands were shaking too hard for anything precise. I could barely feel my fingers. Maya stepped into him anyway, shoulder first, driving him back. She fought like she'd been in a situation before where talking didn't help. She shoved him, tried to take his balance, kept her body between him and the washout edge. The man pushed her away and snapped the hook up toward her face. Maya flinched, and the half second it took to recover cost her footing. She went backward off the edge where the washout had eaten the path. She hit rock, then dropped out of my sight. Her flashlight beam stayed on where it had fallen earlier, cutting across stone in a steady bar of light, like a line on a map. The man turned to me. I ran. I went down the washout slope because it was the only direction that wasn't blocked by him. Loose dirt slid under my boots. I grabbed roots and tore my palms. I hit the gorge bottom and stumbled into shallow water, cold enough to shock my legs numb for a second. I looked back and saw him at the edge, wolf mask in one hand, hook tool in the other, watching like he was deciding how patient he wanted to be. He didn't jump right away. He leaned in slightly, listening. Then my radio crackled with the dispatcher's voice, faint and distorted by the hills, calling my unit and asking for status. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The sound alone was enough to make the man's head turn. That's when I saw the strap across his chest and the little black box clipped to it. A cheap body camera, the kind security guards wear, the kind you can buy online if you want to record something without anyone's permission. He wasn't just hunting for a victim, he was collecting moments. That detail chilled me more than the mask did, because it meant he wanted the story to exist. I ducked under an overhang and crawled into a gap between rock and roots, a space barely big enough for my shoulders. The air inside was damp and close. My breath sounded too loud. I forced myself to breathe slow and quiet, the way you do when you're hiding as a kid and you think the sound of breathing can give you away. The man climbed down into the gorge. His boots scraped rock. He moved carefully, not like someone panicking, not like someone chasing. He paused at the water and looked both ways. I kept my eyes on his hands. I watched the hook tool, the way it hung ready. I watched the mask, which he kept by his side like it was just another piece of gear. He walked past my hiding place close enough that I could see a fresh scratch on his knuckle, a thin line of red. He could bleed. That mattered because it meant he wasn't some unstoppable thing. He was a person who could be caught if we survived long enough for that to happen. He didn't shout, he didn't growl, he didn't need to. Silence was part of his control. I stayed still until the gorge filled with other sounds, voices echoing off rock, flashlights clicking on, boots on stone, deputies calling out names, Maya's first, then Curtis's, then, a beat later, mine. A voice carried down, "Technician, if you can hear me, respond." My radio was still on. I didn't press the button until I saw a deputy's light sweep close enough to wash the overhang in white. Then I crawled out with my hands up, palms raw, arm throbbing, and my mouth finally able to form words. A deputy grabbed my shoulder. "You Evan?" I nodded. "He took Curtis," I said. "He's a man. He's wearing a wolf mask. He has a hook tool. He's been cutting the line to bait people." Everything after that moved the way law enforcement scenes move when enough people arrive and a situation stops being personal panic and becomes procedure. Deputies spread out, held the trailhead, called for more units. Someone got medical to Maya. They found her alive on a rock shelf below the washout, battered and bleeding but breathing, trying to talk through broken sentences. She kept pointing back toward the recess with a shaking hand, as if her body understood the direction even when her mind couldn't land on words. Curtis wasn't in the recess anymore. The recess led to a deeper crack, and the deeper crack connected to an old drainage tunnel that had been cut through rock long ago. The kind of forgotten infrastructure nobody thinks about until it becomes useful for the wrong reason. They found it because I showed them the cut lock, the boot prints, the hanging mask, and the place where the ground had been disturbed like something heavy had been pulled through. They found Curtis at dawn down in the tunnel, still wearing his pack. His eyes were open. He didn't speak. The deputy who reached him first came back out and shook his head once. That was all anyone needed. Deeper in, they found the missing hikers from last month. That part never became a neat story for the public because the public doesn't like the idea that someone can simply take people, keep them hidden nearby, and let rumors do half the work for him. People would rather believe in something supernatural than believe in a man with patience. The man didn't get far. He had parked a rusted pickup on an access road beyond the gate, hidden under brush where it wouldn't be seen from the main lot. Deputies tracked the boot prints coming out on the other side of the washout and heading straight toward that access road. They caught him nearby, crouched in a thicket, wolf mask on, camera running, as if he wanted one last scene recorded before it ended. He didn't fight like a monster. He fought like a cornered person, which is exactly what he was. They took him alive. Later, after my arm was cleaned and wrapped and I'd been asked the same questions 3 different ways, a deputy handed me a clear evidence bag. Inside was a small notebook they'd taken from the man's pocket. On the first page, he'd written the trailhead name, the date, and a list of vehicles he'd seen, cabin owners, a ranger unit number, and my work truck with my plate number written in careful block print like a man practicing a skill. He hadn't followed me by accident. He'd invited me. The state replaced the shed lock the next week with a thicker one, and they posted fresh signs about restricted areas and radios and staying on marked trails. People took selfies under the signs anyway. Life went on the way it always does. I kept the old cut padlock because it was the only honest thing he left behind. Every time I look at it, I remember how the woods felt that day, quiet in the wrong way, and how easy it was to pretend it was just a normal job until the moment it stopped being one.